Hi everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thank you for joining me today and welcome to my channel. We are going to, as you can probably surmise, continue with our fandemonium here. This is what we accomplished last week, plus one piece that frankly none of us liked, which has gone to the crumb pile. And I started just a little bit more of another one. On these, I have started, because I know I'm going to want to applique these down, I have started to turn under the top edges on the pieces that I'm making. I have one more to add on here, and then I think that will be finished for that piece. I want them to be different, for lack of a better word, sizes, different angles, I guess. So I want some that are shy of 90 degrees. I want some that are larger than 90 degrees, but not 180. I want some that are 180. For all I know, I want some that are more than 180. So I guess some that are about 90-ish, but probably won't be exactly 90-ish. And I have some thoughts, which I'll show you in a minute, about one way I might put them together. I did want to talk a little bit about the background, and thank you all for your input on the background and which you would prefer. Frankly, I'm still up in the air at the moment. I'm leaning a bit more toward white, but that could depend on how I end up putting them together, to be honest. One of my thoughts actually was to do like a subtle gray and white print. Sorry, that isn't very well pressed. So that there's some more movement in the background, but not enough to overwhelm. So it could be something like this. This is a fairly large print as background prints go. This is one of my fabrics that's available in my Spoonflower shop. Shameless, half shameless, at least plug. I'll put a link down below if you're interested. So that might be a possibility. It adds a little more texture to it without dampening this too much. I think the black and white is just a little too much. So we'll see. This one, this is really badly pressed. I'm gonna have to at least run an iron over it once. It's still bad, but we'll get the gist of what we want to do here. So here's another, this is a very linear gray and white print. But I think that one is at least a better option than the black and white. So a gray and white print might be an option. Fortunately, I'm not at a place where I really have to make a decision just yet. See, that's a nice shape when it's more than 180 degrees, if we add them like that. So that's my whoop-de-doo for the moment and background. So any more input on backgrounds, always welcome. I love hearing your opinions on things. So the next thing that I want to try is to do a piece like this, maybe a little larger, I don't know, but alternate it with white. I would like to do, let me take these two just as an example. Of course, I would not put the same two together, but have them be not joined here. And I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about that, but I want to give it a try today. And again, I would have the blades be different lengths, but getting them to connect and do everything that I want down at the bottom without something in between, I think is going to be, could be problematic. Maybe yes, maybe no. If I do it this way with nothing in between, and then it's just the background showing through, then I have a lot of turning under to do because I've chosen not to do raw edge applique on these. I want to turn under the edges. So do I want to do that, or do I want to have some of the background fabric, and I'm going to use white today just because, you know, I've got a lot of white, then at least some of it gets turned under. I don't know that that's that big a deal. I'm more concerned about how I'm going to make sure these are connected as I want them down here, because that's going to be a very small space to try to connect a series of blades. So I could just have blades in between. I could try joining them somehow here. I guess it would almost need to be an applique down here, wouldn't it? Because I'm going to end up appliquing the rest of it. I guess I could do that and then turn the rest under. And that way, no matter what background I use, it will be ready to go on that background. If I use white in between, then I'm stuck with white. Well, not that that's necessarily being stuck with, but that limits me to one option, which is white, if I want to use that block in the quilt. Or, of course, not use that block in that particular quilt. So I think I'm going to try it first without a background blade in between. And I will, of course, find something other than these two of the same fabric. So I want to give that a go first, and we'll see how it goes. So I'll cut a couple more blades. I'm really liking the fabrics that I use, and many of you commented on how bright and happy they are, and thank you for that. I love them. I'm into brights. And of course, black and white prints. But those are moot for the moment for this quilt. So I'll cut some more blades and maybe show you what I decide to do down here on at least a couple of them. I have 3 blades ready, and all of the edges have been turned under, including this bottom edge. And as I'm thinking about starting to put these together, I have a choice. Do I want the ends here to be even at the bottom in some fashion, either squared off or rounded? And I don't think I do. I don't mind having them staggered, so then I have to decide what I'm doing down here. And then with the next one, could I have that one further down and this one further up? Questions. I have questions. Of course I could. Do I want to is the question. Or do I want to stagger them more like this? Kind of think it's more interesting this way, isn't it? What if I even crossed that way? And then that becomes more of an issue. Yes, you'd think that at some point I would make things in my life easier, but oh no, oh no. I don't know. I kind of like it that way. What happens when I add more pieces in if I choose to do that? Let me find a background for us here, just so how we could see how it would look on a background, which of course I would have better pressed than this one, but it might also depend on how I ultimately put the pieces together as to what I need to have happening down here. So maybe until I decide how I put it together, I'm not going to be able to say what I'm going to do, which is just kicking the can down the road. Decisions another day. But there we have an option. If I put another one on, which would not be this color, of course, then that one could cross over. I'm getting a lot of bulk going on down here. I just really think I can't decide this until I figure out how I'm putting it together, because if I need it to have a true corner here, or will I ever need it to have, I could always overlap that on something else, say this piece, and maybe it's going to overlap thusly. Are we happy with thusly overlapped? I don't know that this is a likely scenario, but yeah, you know, maybe I'm not needing to worry about that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just stitch this sucker down. It's not as if I've never ripped out any sewing in my life. So if I need to do that, it's quite doable. And if I just stitch along here, then I've held all three pieces together. And that will be a very little bit to reverse engineer if I need to. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll just use an invisible with a very narrow zigzag, since they are finished edges. These three blades are now loosely but securely appliqued together. And I think I would still have opportunity to add more on here if I wanted to. I could slip it under here, or in between these two, or underneath here. So I still have options. This, I don't know if it will fit in with the current quilt that I'm building, but if it doesn't, it might be one on its own. It's maybe a little bit similar to the piece that I did with the Dresden plates, which I will link in the description below. And by the way, if I say that I'm going to, or even if I say I'm going to try to remember to link it in the description and you don't see it there, please feel free to mention that in the comments to remind me that I didn't do that. I'm okay with that. I would rather you do that than to not have something there that I promised you I would do. So this will be added to our repertoire or our toolbox or something. And now let's talk about how these might go together. In the rattly bag, if we bring out these pieces, then we have pretty standard opportunities. So we could do something like this and just have them moving across in rows. We could do them in columns. We could match them up like this and end up with circles, which, let me zoom out a little bit here, which would be perfectly acceptable. Not at all what I'm looking to do. So that's not what's in my mind's eye. And so you may well choose to do this. And I think it's kind of interesting, but it's not what my choice would be. In fact, I probably wouldn't even do it. Would I do it that way? What would I do in the center? Would I cut those off and those up against each other? Would I have this be more a typical, more like a Dresden plate, which I'm not really doing here? Kind of want it to just be at most this 180 degrees here as a fan, which does not mean that we don't have options. Now, I am going to broach this just not because it's necessarily going to happen, but just because, you know, we have to cover it because it's me. So this is not a background. Be calm. I'm not suggesting that as a background, but I am wondering, I guess, what would it look like if that were say, in between the blocks, just as a thin stripe in between the blocks. Would that be distracting? Would it add a little punch to it? Would it cater to Karen's obsession with black and white stripes? Yes, that much we know would be true. But even obsessed Karen isn't sure that's what she wants to do. If I use these, I think it would be only if I turn each of these into a block of different sizes, rectangles, but different sizes and proportions, and then had this running in between the blocks, so that I would have, let me find some white paper again, I shall return. So let's say maybe these become blocks, and this will have the stripe in between it. This one might have a stripe there too, or might not. It wouldn't have to be every block. Wouldn't have to be between every 2 blocks. I don't think that's too distracting, actually. It breaks up this color a bit. And if it has a pretty stark white background, I don't think it would be too much. And I would certainly want to limit the width of it. That might be too much, but just a narrow, like no more than ½ an inch, probably more like ¼ inch, might be kind of a little bit of interest. Or any black and white print. Wouldn't have to be a stripe. Wouldn't have to be diagonal, although that's my inclination. So that's a possibility, is to just make these into rectangular blocks and fit them together like a puzzle. Possibility. See what you think. You knew I had to try to get a stripe in there somewhere. I didn't know I was going to try to get a stripe in there, but here we are. I am next going to switch over to my iPad to show you a couple of possibilities and how this actually might look in a little more structured fashion. So let me get that set up to make sure that the camera and my iPad and the lighting are all going to agree on the best way to proceed. I think I have this set and the plane has finished flying over. Hopefully we'll be ready to go here. I am in Procreate on my iPad, and I have photographed the 4 blocks, or the 4 pieces that we have done, and trimmed around them and rescaled them. They're all the same scale relative to each other, but I've of course made them smaller so that we have some room to play with these blocks. I have also simulated a light gray print background. It's a much larger print than I would use probably, but it will give us that effect. And then I've also created a simulated uneven black stripe, which we can change the size and scale on. Now, my original thought, I will show you in a bit, something that I was playing with earlier. But let's see how this might look if we had, say, 2, and I'm just going to duplicate this 180-degree piece here and hide the others. So if these were blocks, let's see what might happen if we put a black and white stripe. And I'm going to duplicate and keep one for reference because I'm going to mess with the size of these pieces here in a moment. Say we put that in between those blocks. And let me change the length of this. Then we could have an effect like that. rotate that one a little bit. It's driving me a little crazy. Now, so we could have a block like that, and we could shift these however far or close we wanted them to be. This looks like the Very Hungry Caterpillar to me for some reason, as I've been playing with these. Or we could have something that looks like a broken sort of circle, oval. These would be different fabrics, of course, but this is just to kind of get a general idea. Or I could move this way over. In fact, let me flip this so that it doesn't look like the same block so much. All right. So that's an option. I don't know if I'd have them that far apart, but I don't think I'd want them lined up in a semicircle. So say we had those three pieces. I'll group them so that we can make a duplicate of that set. And we could just continue doing blocks in this general shape and form. Now, it doesn't mean that they would all be exactly the same, of course, if we're improv piecing these fan pieces. If we introduce another block, which is not 180 degrees, then what are our options? Let's delete that one and move this group up out of the way. So now we have this block, and we could, let's add in this block as well. So we could play with these two and do something like that. We could flip it around and sort of change direction. If we add in, say, another one of these, then we could create a wave effect. Then if we add in another one of these half circles, we could add it in over here, and I could try to match it up like that. I could send it off in that direction. I could bring it down here, or I could bring a piece up here so that it starts to come back on itself. Now, does that not look like a Very Hungry Caterpillar? Or maybe a dragon for the Chinese New Year? No, it's not quite that. It's a Very Hungry Caterpillar to me. Whatever. And so we could do a lot with changing direction. I have not yet played with this other piece we added in today. So let's see how that might look if we hide that group and say this block is like this, and this block, come on, I just want to move you down, thank you, and oops, rotate that a bit and line that up here. Then we have some airspace in between the blades. And we could add in, say, one of these, which is not a complete half circle. And we could move that there. It's kind of interesting. It's not something that I had been looking at, so I don't know how I'm feeling about it at the moment, but it certainly is interesting. Then if we moved this piece, so all I'm doing is just flipping them around and changing directions and sending it off to other places just for fun. So then if we take this other half square piece, I could move that over here. I'm going to lose that piece over here. If it goes out of bounds, then Procreate erases that part. And then move this piece up here, and it can start going off in another direction. I'm wondering where else I might put one of these. You know, if I've just got one of them, it looks like it's hanging out there doing funky stuff. So that I think is this piece. What if we replace it with another one of these? Flip it so it looks a little different. Oops, a little different anyway. Oh, then I've got the orange against the orange. Changed my mind. Okay. And then I'm probably muttering into my hand, aren't I? I'm almost thinking, though, that in this case, I want to, maybe I want to move it off in that direction. As usual, I've lost track of where things are now. I send it off in that direction. Then I'm using open space again, but now I've got a different direction. I can start turning things a little bit of something different for the eye rather than just all of these. Oops. Which one was that? Solid pieces. That looks a little more like a dragon, doesn't it? With sort of wingy things. So we could, let's take one of those just for fun. What if we made those really longer pieces? Stop it. Then it looks like a dragon wearing it. The very hungry caterpillar wearing a scarf. Okay, it could work. I don't want to move it too far because then I've got the, I will lose the end there if it goes off the edge. So then these pieces I'm going to want to move over a bit. All right, now it's a woman riding in a convertible with a scarf around her hair, and the ends are blowing. Yeah, whatever. Let's move it all over. Whoops, missed one. Goes a little more that direction. And we have not used a stripe in this case. I'm not at all sure we want to use a stripe. So there's a possibility. I want to save that, so I'm just going to go to the gallery, duplicate that, and you see a little bit of where this ended up, which I'll show you in a minute. But let's try a couple other things here. And let's start with, say, 2 of these. So I'll need another one. Now in this one, I have saved you the pain of watching me duplicate and move things around. I've just done a series of half circle fans and made a column out of them, and they're staggered with black and white stripe in between. And I like that too. Oh, let me show it to you a little larger. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? That has a certain kind of almost symmetrical but still asymmetrical look. So if you're torn between being symmetrical or asymmetrical type, and these of course would be not exactly the same blocks. All right, with these blades about the same length except for a couple of them, let's see what would happen if we simulated some of the blades being longer. I think it would make it more interesting. So let's see what we can do here. If we made this one longer. It's a pretty sloppily sewn blade, wasn't it? And how about this orange one down here? Make that one longer. Keep trying to reach up to the camera to do this. And then this green one we made longer. Then I think that really adds more interest to it when you start doing all of that. It could stand to be longer still, I think. So you can see how you could have fun with different lengths of blades. For example, if we take this piece, it could have been moved in a different direction. Say it would go this direction, and then it looks something more like something in flight rather than something grounded like a robot named Hilda. So that's basically all I did, was just sliding things around and changing the directions, etc., etc. So there's Hilda or Grace or someone. Now I did basically the same thing when I was playing with that concept earlier, and this is what I ended up with. It's just the same pieces that are rotated and flipped around, and they come back on themselves, they go off in a different direction. And I like that. I think I might want these a little smaller within the canvas. So perhaps something more like that. Maybe even smaller, have some more negative space in there. And I like that. This is the point where I thought, you know, maybe white background is the way I want to go. It's such a sharp contrast to the colors. And I didn't add in our open piece on this one. I didn't have it at that point. That's a possibility, though I'm rather liking this quite solid look against the openness of the white. Now I could add in, let's see what this might look like if I added in that gray background color. So let me go grab that, and I will come back and we can kind of see what it might look like. Just as a matter of interest, if you're interested in Procreate, I had created these backgrounds, or textures actually, for an art piece that I was working on, and so I've just pulled that in. I'm going to change the size so it fits the whole canvas, and then to move this one up above. And then I am going to change the transparency on this so it isn't quite so in your face, but just sort of gives the effect. So that's roughly what it would look like if it had, say, a light gray print, which probably wouldn't be this large. But that shows you the effect. And you know, it's okay. It adds extra texture and some movement. But let's compare that with white background, gray background, or white background. Let me know in the comments which you like, understanding this is probably not the print that would be there. I did a little something different on this piece, and it involves what I did up in this area. Sorry, I can't change the size of the gallery, so. So I added some more pieces in and took it off in a different direction. So I just kept playing with that. And, you know, that was a lot of fun. It's just moving back and forth and up and around and over and whatnot. So those are our three basically possibilities. We have Hilda in the convertible. We have the symmetrical asymmetry, and we have this sort of random piece here. I don't know what you think about Hilda. I'm just really liking Hilda. She might be a piece all on her own. So in the comments, lots of things I'd love to hear from you on, whether what you think about a subtle gray print as a background, which of these pieces you like best, and what you think of this open concept for this particular fan. It's been a lot of fun today. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next week. I have something maybe in mind. We'll see. But I do hope to see you. Thank you again for being here. I really, really do appreciate you all. And I appreciate your comments as well. So I hope to see you next time. In the meantime, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.